today we're going to be breaking down the 4 most popular real estate brokerages that offer revenue share as a benefit of the brokerage. And so we're going to be looking at EXP Realty, Real Broker, Epique Realty, and LPT Realty to see what the differences are. We're going to go through each model. We're going to look in detail at what they offer, how many tiers you get access to, how many qualifiers you need, how much you can make per agent. And at the very end, we're going to do a 10-year earnings comparison across all 4. So you have a very realistic picture of what the long-term potential is for growing a rev share organization at each one of these brokerages and which one might be right for you. But I want to start with EXP just to see how they structured it. And we'll see then how some of the other brokerages that have come out have done it slightly differently. So EXP has an 80-20 split. You have a $16,000 cap. Now, the percentage of revenue share that's available currently is 50%. And with a $16,000 cap, that's $8,000. EXP per agent does have more rev share available than most of these other brokerages as a function of the fact that they have the highest cap. So $16,000 is the highest cap that we're going to look at. And so therefore, 50% of that just happens to be more than anyone else. But now they have 7 tiers, right? So that means you've got your tier 1, the people that you bring in, and then 6 levels below that. In order to unlock all 7 of the levels at EXP, you need 30 plus frontline qualifying agents. And then you can see the percentages here that go to each tier. So now we're going to move on to Real, because Real was the next brokerage that was really able to successfully kind of compete against EXP with a similar but different model. It is a 85-15 split at Real Broker. You have a $12,000 cap. They also have something called a Rev Share participation fee, which is $175 per year. And then they have a Rev Share processing fee, which I think is like 1.2% of the Rev Share goes into the administrative costs of processing all that. The percentage of Rev Share that's available there, so their buffer is 60% of the revenue per month. So they have a 5-tier system. And then the number of frontline qualifying agents to get all 5 of their tiers is 25 or more. Epique Realty, this is a newer brokerage that came out, but I have heard some people talking about it, that they also have a revenue share model as well. They have an 85-15 split, just like Real Broker. They have a $15,000 cap. That cap decreases by $1,000 per year for the first 5 years. Similar to what we saw at EXP, they share 50% of the available revenue. And so that's going to be anywhere from $5,000 to $7,500. So again, there's a 1/3 decrease over time in the revenue share per agent as that cap goes down. They also have a 5-tier system similar to Real, and they do not have any requirement for frontline qualifiers. So essentially all 5 of your tiers right off the bat are open. And lastly, we've got LPT's Rev Share. So LPT is a little bit different, and you'll see there's more columns on LPT's than any of the others. And that's because LPT has options about which comp plan you as the agent want to be a part of. So one of the comp plans that LPT has is very similar to some of the others, 80-20 split with a $15,000 cap. And that is the brokerage partner. And then there's also a flat fee model. So where you pay $500 per transaction with a $5,000 cap. So you do 10 transactions and you have capped. So because of that, LPT has the least amount of money going into the revenue share pool, even though they're still putting out the same 50% as Epique and the same 50% as EXP. Here, you're going to be looking at either $7,500 or $2,500 based on the comp plan that that particular individual who did the real estate transaction was on. It's a 7-tier system, and the frontline qualifiers that are needed to unlock all 7 tiers is 20 or more. Here you can see what percentage gets paid out on each level at each of the different brokerages. You can see everyone has taken a very different approach. And so we should expect that the rev share that you can earn at each of these brokers should be substantially different based off of this. We're going to see if that's true or not. So what I've done is put together an example rev share organization so we can run some actual numbers to see what kind of revenue gets generated. And I wanted to make sure that we were using the same numbers for each brokerage. So in order to come up with this chart, I had to make 4 realistic assumptions to be able to build a consistent model. What were those 4 assumptions? So the first one is that in your first year, you attract 12 frontline qualifiers in year 1, 10 qualifiers in year 2, 8 in year 3, and then 6 every year after that from years 4 onward. Now, why do I have a decreasing number of agents that you're bringing on each year? The longer an organization has been in business, generally, the less opportunity there is to come in and build a large rev share organization. The next assumption, this is a very important one. A lot of the calculators that you see and a lot of the people that you talk to about revenue share don't take attrition into account where they're talking about rev share organizations, right? So the assumption that I have made is that every single year, 20% of the agents in every single tier of yours, 1 through 5 or 7, 20% of them are going to leave every single year. The next assumption, I'm only going to assume that about 20% of the agents that are in your downline are involved in agent attraction. And this is pretty realistic based on what we've seen. It may even be high. Of the 20% who are recruiting, on average, I have them attracting 6 agents in their first year, 5 agents in their second year, 4 agents in years 3 through 5, and only 3 agents per year in years 6 onward. Again, for the same reason that over time, the opportunity in a rev share organization does diminish, and the number of agents that you're likely to be able to attract each year will very likely go down over time. And so I want to reflect that realistically in this model. So again, starting off in year 1, you have 12 frontline qualifiers. Awesome. But in the next year, you're only going to attract 10, and 2.5 of your agents from the first year left. Remember that 20%, they're gone. So now you have 20 in year 2. The next year, you attract 8 agents, but you lost 4, right? You lost 20% of the agents that were there the year before. That leaves you with 24. The next year, you add 6, you lost 5, you've got 25. The next year, you added 6 and you lost 5 again, so you're at 26. As you can see here, over those 10 years, in year 10, you still only have 29 frontline qualifying agents. And that's the function of attrition. Agents do leave, and they don't just leave on tiers 2 through 5, they leave on tier 1 as well. So now that we know how our frontline is going to grow over time, we need to look at how the following tiers below that are going to grow, again, from those agents in our tier 1 going out and attracting their tier 1, which is your tier 2. In year 1, we managed to get 14 agents in our tier 2, and that was a function of 20% of the agents in our tier 1 going out and attracting a certain number. When we get to year 2, we've got 20 agents in our front line. 20% of them, or 4 agents, they're going to go out and they're each going to attract 5 new agent partners. And so that's going to give us 20 new agent partners into our tier 2. We started with 14, we added 20, but we have to remember 20% of the 14 left. They're gone. So we had a net of 17 agents that we added. And so we started with 14, we end with 31, and that's how this works all the way down. I haven't changed any of the math. It's the same on every single tier. 20% are going to attract. They're going to attract a certain number. That number is going to get lower each year, and then 20% from the year before are going to leave. That's how we built this model. I think it's pretty realistic. So this is what the total agent count looks like at the end of 10 years. One thing I want to point out, this is only 5 tiers. So this chart only applies to Real and Epique. But what happens when we look at a 7-tier model? How much does it change? When we add in tier 6 and 7, this is what happens. So the dark green here are the additional agents that were added to your organization, not by any extra work that you did, but simply by how the rev share organization is structured. All right, so when we look at that percentage-wise, again, in year 1 with the additional tier 6 and 7, you got 66 additional agents, which was 174% of the agents you would have had without it. And by year 10, you had an additional 4,559 agents in your downline, an additional 4,500 agents, which was 382% more agents in a 7-tier versus a 5-tier system. So now let's look at some sample rev share earning dollars based on these numbers. Now, one of the things we need to understand is not every agent is going to cap. So here's the assumption I've made. 25% of the agents in your downline will hit their cap, okay? And that's going to give you 25% of the potential rev share. 25% of the agents in your downline are going to hit half of their cap. So they're going to sell half the amount of real estate that would be required to cap. 25% of them are going to sell a quarter of that, and 25% are going to sell 0. So when you add all that up, what you realize is that you're actually going to be getting probably around 43.75% of the rev share that you see on these charts per agent. This is the max revenue share at each of the individual companies that you can earn. We're going to times everything by 43.75%, and this is the average rev share per agent that, based on our model, you can expect to actually receive. And so this is a more realistic number than what you're seeing with the max rev share per agent. So now we can combine these and look at realistically how much could you make at each of these brokerages if you had that number of agents and you were earning that amount of rev share. So let's start with EXP. Total 10-year earnings at EXP were $5.64 million based on this model. First year, $34,000. Last year, $1.1 million, but a grand total of $5.6 million. We go to Real. Surprisingly enough, $5.6 million. They start the first year a little bit higher at 41. By the last year, they're a little bit lower at 973,000. That's a function of not having more than 5 tiers. That's why what you would see if you went out more years is that EXP would probably start to pull ahead a little bit more just based on the additional agents from the lower tiers. We go to Epique, 5.7. All right. More in the first year, less in the last year than EXP. And we go to LPT, 6.6 million. So again, a fair amount less in the first year, but substantially more in the later years. And that again is a function of the additional tiers. We had enough frontline qualifying agents to unlock all 7 levels. And when you've got those 7 levels in the later years, the organization really starts to explode. That being said, the first 3 brokerages that we looked at were shockingly close from what I was expecting. If you take the median, they were all only off by about $60,000 plus or minus across 10 years at these brokerages. For models that look as different as they are in terms of what percentage, number of qualifiers, percentages per tier, all of that, it was shocking for me that at the end, you're talking about a difference of plus or minus 60 grand across all 3 of them, given these assumptions. Now, LPT being $1 million more, I don't know if I was honestly expecting that either. And that really is a function of having a 7-tier system with a lower number of frontline qualifiers that allows you to access more agents sooner. So that's where these numbers come from. If you look at LPT, what you are going to notice is that in the early years, particularly years 1 and year 2, your earnings are definitely going to be less. And that's a function of LPT taking less money from the agents. And therefore, there's just simply not as much money to give back to the agents because LPT didn't take that much money from the agents to begin with. But because of those 7 tiers and because of the lower number of frontline qualifiers, in the later years, it really starts to grow very fast. When you look at it on a chart here, even with that extra $1 million at LPT, these are all pretty similar. I mean, again, you're talking plus or minus 60 grand on 3 of them, plus $1 million on the other. It's still not that crazy different. So this is going to show the growth per year per brokerage. So as you can see, first year, Epique's got the most, LPT's got the least, and then things start to get kind of balanced out by year 4, 5. And then that's where you really start to see EXP and LPT both start to kind of overtake Real and Epique. And that's a function, again, of a 7-tier system versus a 5-tier system. In the long run, the more tiers will almost always yield more income farther on down the road. So with all that information, I think we're finally at the point where we can announce the winner. And the winner is nobody. That's my opinion, guys. Nobody. Because in order to determine who the winner is, we have to figure out who's best. But best according to what? Most revenue in year 1, most revenue in year 10, revenue per agent, number of tiers, number of frontline qualifiers, fastest growth. Like, how are we going to judge these Rev Share organizations that all look very different, but all pretty much kind of get you to the same place after a long enough period of time? How are we going to determine which one's best? And I don't really think we can, because for me to determine what's best, I need to know what's most important to you. And I don't know right now what's most important to you in your goals in building a Rev Share organization. So I really can't answer which one's best. So everything that we've done up until now is theoretical. These are the theoretical numbers given these assumptions that you could get. But what we have to make sure of is, does the brokerage that we're aligned with have the potential in themselves to allow us to grow our organization large enough to actually capture those dollars? Statistically, you cannot build a growing Rev Share organization that is at a brokerage that is not growing. If the brokerage isn't growing, your Rev Share organization is not growing because you are just one little sliver of that entire organization. As we look at EXP, Real, and LPT, you can see the difference in how they're growing. LPT seeing a lot of growth, Real seeing a lot of growth, and EXP, what we're actually seeing is a decreasing growth. So they're actually shrinking right now. In the year 2022 to 2023, LPT Realty grew by 900%, Real by 122%, and EXP by 1.76%. And then from 2023 to 2024, LPT Realty grew by 175%, Real Broker by about 67%, and EXP shrunk by 2%. And that's where that 20% attrition number that we factored in needs to be adjusted kind of on a case-by-case basis sometimes based on the organization that you're in. So if you're at EXP, that attrition number needs to be way, way higher to be realistic with what they're actually seeing right now. And here's the breaking news, guys. rev share opportunity diminishes over time. I don't know why no one just comes out and says this, but that is the absolute truth. Every single one of the organizations that we looked at today, over time, the opportunity to join that brokerage and build a large rev share organization will continue to go down. And so what I know is 15 years from now, if I'm doing a video about LPT Realty telling you reasons to join, one of the reasons I will not be telling you to join is for rev share, because by then the potential here will be diminished as well. In 15 years, we'll probably be coming up on what our saturation level is, the same way that EXP is doing it right now. The same thing will happen to Real, the same thing will happen to Epique, the same thing will happen at each one of these organizations. Rev share is an opportunity for people who get in early to help that company grow. The more you help the company grow, the more that you can benefit from that. But if the company's not growing, you can't build a rev share organization. That is just the reality. But here's the cool thing. 80% of the agents in your downline organization don't care about any of this at all. Why is that? Because 80% of the agents are not going to do anything with rev share when they're at most of these organizations. We know that because we have 15 years of data to show it. And so with that being said, what's the value proposition for the brokerage when rev share potential is gone? If the value proposition that you have is based on rev share and the rev share is no longer possible, what's the value proposition? And so what I would suggest is, as you're exploring brokerages, and what we've already established, at least in my opinion, is there is no clear winner when it comes to rev share. What I do think is that each one of these brokerages has thoughtfully put together a plan that they think will effectively reward the agents that are helping them grow their brokerage. And based on what I've seen, each one of them has done that successfully in some form or fashion. Is it going to be a lot more attainable at certain brokerages than others? Absolutely. But they've all made it possible, mathematically speaking, to grow a large rev share organization at any of them. But when that potential diminishes, what's left over? So for the 80% of agents with no downline, this is my pitch for why I think LPT wins out over the others. Dollars and cents wise, this is how it adds up to me. So for the 80% of agents with no downline, over the same 10 years we just looked at while the individuals were building their downline, the 80% of people who didn't have one, this is what they could be experiencing. $110,000 in additional splits at EXP versus LPT. So the same agent who didn't do any agent attraction at EXP and didn't do any agent attraction at LPT, they would have saved $110,000 in annual splits by joining LPT instead of EXP. At both Epique and Real, an agent would save $70,000 over that exact same period of time. Now, the cool thing is if you join LPT, you take that $5,000 cap, maybe eventually you realize you do want to get into agent attraction. You happen to, bring on a big team. You've got an organization that's starting to grow. You're not stuck at that low flat fee comp plan. You can switch to the rev share brokerage partner comp plan and start earning all those revenue share dollars. But you're not having to pay the higher cap while you're doing it. So you can build the downline, and when it gets big enough that it makes sense for you to make the switch and take on that higher cap, we give you the option to do that very, very easily. So at the end of the day, all of this really comes down to one question. What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? What's important to you about your business, about a brokerage that has a rev share option? Again, I think what we've learned is that it's not easy to name a winner. And I think a lot of people were probably expecting me to name a winner at the end of this, and I just don't see one because I don't know what your goals are to know what's best for you. If your goal is to join a brokerage, not be there for very long, you're going to stay for a year, you want to make as much money as you possibly can in the first year, there's options for that. If you want to stay somewhere for a long period of time and really have a career and really build a large organization and make the most amount possible in the long run, we have options for that and everything else in the middle. But you have to ask yourself, what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? Again, I want you to think about the question of what's the value proposition left when the rev share potential is gone? Because the rev share potential at each of these brokerages over time will be gone. So ask yourself, which brokerages provides the most value if rev share didn't even exist? So that to me is the approach that I took, and I found personally LPT Realty happened to be the brokerage model for me. Again, my personal goals are I don't really care initially in the first couple of years whether I'm making the most or the least or a middle amount, But what I plan to do is over time continue to stay consistent, build my organization, and hopefully in the long run have, again, a very large, very successful Rev Share organization that can offset a lot of expenses for me, for my family, and allow me to stop trading as much time for money. If you have similar goals, great. This might be a good model. Either way, I would love to connect with you. I'd love to learn more about your business, what it is you're trying to do, what your goals are, to see which brokerage might be the best fit. It might be LPT Realty, it might be someone else, but I would love to connect with you, get a chance to know more about you, your goals, your business, what you're hoping to accomplish, answer any questions that you've got, and see if this might be the right model for you and if I might be the right sponsor. If you're interested in doing that, click the link down in the description below. You can schedule a private one-on-one Zoom call with me. I would love to connect with you, learn more about you, and we'll go from there. Guys, thank you so much for watching. If you've got questions, leave them down in the comments below. I will do my best to get all of them answered. And until then, be well.